all started with a couple of us mates trying to help each other out through ISO, and stuff had been cancelled. Everything kind of gone out the window.
Yeah.
And so we got together and we said, we need to create a bit of a challenge. We need to get each other motivated. So I said to him, if you can put forward some goals and I can put forward a few goals and we hold each other accountable, then maybe we'll get through some running or we'll get through some meditation.
And it was a 4-week challenge. So I think we started noticing that, well, one, we're doing more than we're doing. These weekly catch-ups are kind of extending into an hour and a half, and we've got a lot to talk about. And luckily, we were all kind of thinking the same things. Luckily, someone started the conversation, and then we decided to do something.
Yeah, and then what evolved basically was it was a simple commitment bet to stay committed to each other's goals, but then also to connect with each other, because during that time, it's really hard to actually connect with, like, you couldn't see your mates or anything.
Yeah.
And we've put this network together, or this online community together, and then offered them the 28 Day Zoop Challenge, which is basically improving well-being.
All our families were in the same situation. They were all not doing anything, or like everyone was having their own issues.
Yeah.
Said, do we just try this with our family, see what we come up with? That's where the conversation started to go. We thought, well, why can't anyone else? And we just kept going, and then like, oh, so
platform through these goals is a good conduit to make vulnerability or have better support and make goals public instead of a private thing. And then further to that, if we can create a platform where that's all normal, it will be so divergent and so different compared to what current platforms are like, i.e. Facebook and Instagram, in which you'll only post
the best of the best.
Absolutely. And so if we strip it back and we say, you know what, today I'm posting that I didn't complete a goal, and then you have people supporting you, what a much more healthier and more supportive platform that might be, such that people will actually feel able to be vulnerable on a platform like that. I think that's the direction we're working towards. I think it starts at like normalizing those types of moments.
Yep.
Vulnerability is something that's very hard to come by, particularly in a time where social media is not vulnerable whatsoever.
Yep.
And if you're exposed to, say, social media, all you see basically is like highlights of people's lives.
Yep.
But in the group setting that we had, as soon as one person got vulnerable, we're all exposed to this moment of, oh, okay, this is really serious. Let's all listen.
Yeah, because they wanted to put a stake to it, to stay committed to it. So the idea was they get $100. Amazing. And if they don't complete their goals, that money's then dispersed. I think you asked me to be the referee. Like, you need to have a loss if you don't do it, because you're more likely to do something if it costs you. And the other real, like from the start, the real basis was you're more likely to do something or a task if you're doing it with someone else. And in the way that if you do it, you've got the support of your friends. If you don't do it, you're also, you're accountable for it.
Maybe, for example, us four together, we say, I've got a few goals, and they typically they vary from doing meditation to going to bed on time. And I'll commit to it certain amounts of time a week, so that it actually becomes a bit of a habit after 4 weeks. And then we all put together, say, $20 or $50, something that's not worth losing, i.e. I could run today, or I could not run and I'll lose the money. And the boys will all be like, what's going on? But there's always that feeling of, I'll just go get it done. At the end of the week, we'll all review together and we'll have like a little group chat.
Yeah.
And that's a moment in which everyone can talk about, like, through their goals, how their week actually went.
Because we actually extended it to our friends, because only like 4, 5, 6 of us. And then we were like, oh, there's like people we haven't spoke to or haven't caught up with for a year, 2 years. So we increased the group to 10. And then we, connected with local businesses. So Jerome's friend runs a company that sells merchandise. One of the girls, she makes towels out of 95% recycled plastics that we knew of. So we just tried to connect with local people.
And that contributes to the broader network as you described it.
That's what we're trying to do.
That was my
really clever.
As we started to build, that just started becoming that segue where it was like, okay, like, why didn't you run? Or it was like, did you do your goals? Didn't do them because, I just didn't feel good this week. And then you just let people expose as much as they liked. And as we progressively got further and further, people became more open and honest.
I guess I can appreciate the shift between, we did make sure it was rigid at the start in terms of really putting onus on the proof in the receipts being documented and kind of rigid in the sense that if you didn't have it, even if your word's not enough, and we need to make it objective. But that was always coming from a place of, the more objective we make it, the less you can stray and from, I guess, the initial goal. That, I guess, has changed a little bit at the end of the day. If you are not doing it, that was that stake, it was going towards like a group trip or a common cause. So at the end of the day, you can be upset that you didn't do your goal on one level, but on the same level, you've still put money towards something we're all going to benefit from. Having not done something or failing a week seemed to create those more meaningful moments as a group anyway. So it's so many positives. Yeah.
And good for you to fail at something.
Within our like Zoop goals, there's been so many failures.
We started this the lockdown going, let's get on house party, let's do it.
Yeah.
And we're getting on these phone calls and going, what do we talk about? But no one was chatting about how were you actually coping throughout this period of time.
Yeah.
It was all just, let's all get on and have a laugh. Like,
No one was doing anything.
no one was doing anything. There was nothing to chat about. Like, you go, how was your week? And you go, same as last week. So most of the time it was just around drinking.
We didn't even have a name really. It was just
the name was
just something we were doing as a small group, as like a collective. It was literally confined to a Facebook group or a Messenger group chat, which is where all the receipts were posted.
I think Jerome spent a lot of hours trying to figure out the technical side of how you make websites, apps, all that sort of stuff, that have no idea how to run a business, how to connect to it. We've had to build a website. We've had to try and look at building an app, how to connect with different companies, something we just don't have to do in day-to-day life. We've really had to just put our necks out and go, how on earth do we do this? It took weeks to build.
You've just identified and described empathy being the bridge that connects learning for creativity. So once you can empathize what somebody else is, the shoes that somebody else is walking in, once you can really relate to that, you have a greater understanding, and with that understanding brings the opportunity to come up with solutions, or your behavior will change. What is it, do you think, that's really motivating you?
Now what our why really is if it's so healthy to be vulnerable, and this is a good conduit to do that, and we can open up that conversation that allows for an openness for mental health discussions, even if it's not explicit, even if it's just in the sense of being so many people, just not in terms of their well-being through their habits, but also opening the door for better connectedness, opening the door for better vulnerability, kind of changing some of the society's norms a bit.
I think last year there was like a moment of being very scared that really, and having like these guys around me, like really just switched it. Like it was from, like we spoke about before, from rock bottom to having the most amount of support I've had. Not everyone responds the same way. So asking 10 people, are you okay, is going to be very different. And like that could be very invasive for someone. Like I find it very invasive.
I think that we've all talked about this, that you don't know what to do when someone is actually struggling. This has kind of given us like almost like a toolkit of that there's more than one way to see if someone's okay, and there's more than one way to support that person. It's a little bit around action speaking rather than words, slightly separating from the directness of that question and the directness of those topics. There's other avenues to be that like support network, or I guess like that not being able to objectivize what level of something is going to make someone feel a certain way, or stress wise. Like if you have that bottom, like personally that there's no lower to that. So if you can use that bottom as a metric for someone else's bottom, then there's that immediate connection or those shared feelings that you can use as a basis of empathy. And that's empathy that I don't think you can learn until you've gone through certain things like that. And literally, like I guess if you have that base of empathy, then you can create solutions from that, or then you can level with someone else. I guess figure a way out or connect.
I guess the more it's normalized, the easier it gets for people. And as you said, like those protective factors of like, when I do fall, these are the people that can pick me up. And it really made me reflect on my own parents' experiences and my grandmother's experience moving to Melbourne, and how lucky that's given me an opportunity to do some of the things that I've done. And even put into perspective, like, yes, I'm struggling here at the moment, but I've got shelter.
It kind of skyrocketed our relationship together into like a space where you felt really secure within your friendship group, and you kind of finally, I guess you felt like you belonged. You were asking people about their goals, and in the same way, you're asking how their week went. And they're not directly telling you all their deep thoughts and what's going on.
Oh, okay.
But they're talking about how their week went, how their goals went, whether they achieved them or not. And by asking how they went with that, you're essentially asking them how they are.
We're all coming from a similar background of physios. We see 20 people a day come through our doors. No one learns the same way.
Yeah.
So I could have 10 patients in the same day that have the same injury, that I have to explain that injury in 10 different ways.
Yeah, okay, right.
I have to explain what exercises they do in 10 different ways, or explain how painful it is, or what they've got to do. Someone could come in with a 2 out of 10 pain, someone comes in with an 8 out of 10 pain, so it's for the same thing. How do we teach someone who's a visual learner versus someone who, rope lands, or there's so many different individual characteristics that you've got to look at in a human.
Talk about your life. You connect with the patient or someone who's exercising with you weekly. You're talking to what you're doing, and so that flow-on effect has been nice and obvious. But yeah, in terms of personally dealing with clients day to day, I think for sure one difference for me would be surrounding the emphasis on that kind of week-to-week mentality that maybe we had kind of created within this, where you've got a week of tasks or goals, and you've got a kind of a reset button each week, and you've got a kind of forced reflection, and that's so important in terms of what you do with the patient, because you need to constantly reflect and adjust.
So what you're saying is that the expertise, the technical knowledge is one thing, the application of the technical knowledge is a secondary thing, but the ability to connect and to communicate in a meaningful manner is a different skill entirely.
I think that's the main portion of our job. Yes, you can Google most of the stuff that we do. You can Google lower back pain, you can Google shoulder injuries, but how do you get someone to trust what you're doing and that you're doing the right thing? How do you connect with someone that they really believe that in you and what you're doing? And I think that's the skills that we learned, actually connecting, how important that is for your patients. And I think that's something really positive that we've taken into this Zoop network, or this community we're trying to create, is everyone's different. Everyone reacts differently.
There's definitely a couple of times, and you guys will touch on it, but there's never been a moment other than these times that we'd share together where in a group of 10 or 9 odd boys, that everyone's kind of come to the realization, now's the time to listen. And everyone has this complete respect, and there's real pause.
Yeah.
Especially in a group setting on like a video call as well.
Yeah.
Where we all kind of share this moment of that was really, really special.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever experienced that.
Yeah, right.
Outside of maybe like a team environment where you have to be that close.
I think it was just a natural occurrence, and it was interesting. Just as soon as people started to become vulnerable, people knew. It was like there was a time and a place for the laughs and the jokes, but everyone just kind of would settle and listen. It was like you just had 8 or 9 people to listen to you.
Reading the play. Where do you see capacity for educational experiences to provide that level of understanding and that level of nous?
I think the world's changing first and foremost. I think they keep, and I think a lot of the stuff that we're doing is now, what we found, I think that was quite astonishing, was some of that vulnerability and authenticity and the belonging stuff within our group, and then the groups that we started creating elsewhere started becoming really normal, and we all took to it quite well.
Well, I think school-wise, there's a lot of emphasis on achieving high, which I think we all did. I remember there was one portion of school in year 9 where we did a little bit of a vulnerability thing with the Reach Out Foundation, which is the one thing I really remember from school, is how special that moment was.
Yeah, right.
But 1 hour of it in 6 or whatever, how many years of schooling is not a lot. So when we're looking at achievements, everyone's looking at your marks, your grades. Did you get an A+? Did you get an A? Did you get a B+? Whereas there was no one asking if you didn't quite get that score, or if it was a bit out of character, why was that happening? There was no sort of support, or it wasn't kind of promoted. Explicitly promoted that, okay, we've noticed Connor's, kind of dropped off. Why is that happening? And then for whatever reason, it's come into the real world where whether we failed at a job, we failed in a relationship, we failed in whatever that is, and then we've gone, oh, we don't know what to do. Life isn't quite as, perfect.
But in the educational system, I think that is very hard to come by, just in terms of, it's not often that someone will talk about the dilemmas that they're having in their lives, and it's not really normalized. So if there was a space to normalize some of that, maybe it makes it easier for someone to step up and talk about it. Because I think what we found was, as soon as someone was vulnerable to the extent of, guys, I suck this week, I just couldn't complete the goals, this is what's happening in my life. It opens up the door for someone else to feel vulnerable. And I think one of the things that we said about what we found in terms of this realizing what's actually happening through our actions was that vulnerability spreads more vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, then maybe in the educational system, that's maybe what it needs a little bit more of. And
to touch on our education a little bit more as well, I think, at least personally, it wasn't until the end of getting through the whole course, which is rigorous and which is academic based and which is very competitive even. It's not until you get to the end and people start talking about jobs and opportunities and skills that you realize that the soft skills side of things has probably a greater importance than you were taught during the whole course, and that you could even almost solely rely on them in a lot of jobs, particularly when it comes to private practice. For me, that was a late realization that those soft skills and those things that we've been developing, not really within a framework or a rubric, were the things that were going to be most beneficial or useful. I guess we've only taken those skills from our jobs into this, really, because all the other stuff is injury based. And when we're dealing with behavior change, that's the stuff that is slightly larger than the stuff you learn in the textbook, I think.
And probably more interesting, Tom, right?
Like, very much so.
Like the other stuff is this rote learning stuff, the understanding, the application, which is a low order, low-lying fruit.
Yeah.
But as individuals, you get motivated by when you actually try and do something else. How do you think what you've just explained relates to the notion of social capital, the concept of social capital, if you've heard of that?
One of our first taglines, I think, was, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go further, you go together. And that is in the sense of, your own personal Zoop goals and trying to build a habit. And initially it was like our families and then our larger extended groups.
We're all supporting each other and we're all a network. And can we not only tie each of these groups together, but can we also benefit from having the input of other groups and a wider, community? And then we're like, well, we've done this for about a couple of months. Something's working. Can we spread it? Can we try it in another group?
The good thing about it is anyone can do it. However, I think the younger generation has kind of taken to it, like our generation, like the blokes and the girls that we've spoke to in terms of our age are like, yeah, this is what we need. Like, this is cool.
Looking back now, what are some of the skills that you've individually and collectively learned, do you think?
There's been so much we've had to learn.
I think that there's a chance if we were trying to do something like this 10, 20 years ago, it would have taken a lot more internal confidence to, push through it. Even though it didn't feel completely comfortable, it did feel more and more normal to enter that space.
Every time that I failed, because it's just a moment in time where I'm like, you're not perfect. You need to there's some things you might need to change, and you try to change those things and you fail again, and you try it again, fail again, okay, next thing, and then you just keep on going. So it's such an important moment, even in throughout what we've been trying to create. Not everything has gone to plan, but they're the moments where I think we've collectively been like, okay, step back, this is the time now. Whatever I do from here has to be somewhat meaningful to respect what my parents had given me or my grandmother had given me for their sacrifice. So I think I came away from that as well being just humbled. If that's all I need, then whatever I do from here is going to be good.
We kind of acknowledge what we're doing is not revolutionary. The concepts are really basic. We were surprised we made it through the first few weeks, because even though we hadn't done the exact same thing, everyone had gone through a period where they've gone, I'm going to start doing this. And I'm going to try and do this each week or once a week. It's a pretty common thing that those habits they fall through. And some of the reflections you kind of had from that were really nice. And the way you viewed your failure, in the sense that because I've had that failure, but I've been able to share it, it's been a catalyst for some of those conversations of other people opening up. And it's normalized failure. And it's also, not only normalized it within the group, but made it a much easier pill to swallow because it's becoming a bit more repetitive. So the more you do it, the less it overwhelms you. Hence, those failures aren't as big as speed bumps as they probably once were or usually were.
But the idea now is if we can build that community, you go together, we'll all achieve, our own individual goals, but we're pushed up by each other. If we have a bigger community of people also, feeling more vulnerable or feeling okay to be vulnerable, then within our larger network, that capital itself, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. I think helping improve people's mental health And if this is a platform to help that happen, then I think we're doing some good in the world.